The night was colder than Caleb expected. Snowflakes drifted silently from the black sky, each one glowing faintly under the twin moons. The wind howled through the broken trees like a whispering ghost, curling around Caleb's shoulders as he pulled his coat tighter. His boots crunched on the frozen ground, but every step felt heavier. He had been walking for hours, searching for the rest of his team. Their beacon was gone, his communicator was broken, and the storm had pushed him far from the others. He was alone, or so he thought. In the distance, half buried in a collapsed structure, he spotted something strange movement. Carefully, he approached. His hand rested near his utility belt, though he had no weapons, only tools. When he stepped closer, he saw her, an alien. She was lying still against the wall, her body curled into itself. Her skin was light blue, dusted with frost, and her long, silver hair was tangled with leaves and snow. She wore armor, though it was cracked and broken. Her face was bruised. But her eyes, when they opened slowly, were full of fire. Caleb froze. He had seen images of her species before in briefings, on warning posters. The Zerethi, proud quiet race, once known for their fierce independence and cold diplomacy.
At most.
Humans avoided them. Some called them dangerous. But this one looked more like a dying flame. She stared at him, not moving. Her breath was shallow and her hands were trembling. Caleb raised both palms slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Not here to fight," he said softly. "You're hurt." Of course she didn't understand, but something in his voice, in his calm tone, made her eyes flicker. He took a step forward, then another. She didn't stop him. Looking around, he saw there was little shelter, a half roof above them. Cracked walls. It blocked some wind, but not enough. His own hands were going numb. He looked down at her, then made a choice. Without a word, Caleb took off his thermal bedroll from his pack and unwrapped it. It was meant for one person. The insulation was strong, able to hold warmth, even in freezing conditions. He knelt beside her and gently lifted her up, careful not to startle her. She winced, but didn't pull away. He placed the bedroll around her, wrapping it tight. She blinked at him in confusion. "You need it more than I do," he whispered. She watched him as he sat down nearby, leaning against the broken wall. His teeth began to chatter. The cold bit deep into his skin. Right. Still, he smiled faintly. He had done the right thing. Minutes passed in silence, then slowly she moved. Still wrapped in the bedroll, she shifted toward him, dragging the insulated cloth with her. Her hand, cold but trembling, reached out and touched his arm. Her eyes held no hate, only something soft. Something unsure, she pulled the edge of the bedroll toward him, inviting him inside. Caleb hesitated and nodded. They sat together, side by side, under the shelter. The warmth began to return, not just from the bedroll, but from something deeper. Their shoulders touched. Neither spoke. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside the shelter, between a human and an alien once thought dangerous, a quiet warmth flickered. A warmth that had nothing to do with fire, just kindness, and something more. The snow had stopped falling, and pale sunlight shone through the cracks in the broken roof. Everything outside looked frozen and silent. But inside the small shelter, two lives were still breathing together. Caleb was shivering, curled up on one side of the bedroll. His skin was pale, and sweat covered his forehead. His eyes were closed. He didn't move. Zura was awake. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. His body was too cold, too still. The human had given her his warmth, his only protection, and now he was suffering because of her. Her people would have called him a fool, but she didn't feel anger. She felt something else's sharp pain inside her chest. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't let him die. Zura leaned closer and listened to his breathing. It was shallow. His lips were slightly blue. She moved quickly, using what little she had, strips of cloth from her own armor, some dried herbs from a pouch at her waist, and what remained of the heat. Packing his bag, she began caring for him. She wrapped his hands and feet. She placed the herbs under his tongue. She even laid beside him again, pulling his arm over her shoulders, pressing her body close to his. Her kind were naturally warm-blooded. It was the one gift she could offer. Now, Caleb stirred slightly. His head rolled toward her. His eyes didn't open. "Human," she whispered. She didn't know his name, but that word felt right. She remembered her mother once told her, in the cold, even enemies can become family. Zura stayed close to him for hours, watching him carefully. The warmth between them slowly returned. His body stopped shaking. His breathing grew stronger. By afternoon, he opened his eyes just a little. She saw confusion there. Then relief. "You're still here?" he said weakly. She didn't reply. She didn't understand his words. God. But she nodded, and that was enough for him. He smiled faintly, then drifted back to sleep. Later, as the sun began to set, Caleb awoke again. This time, stronger. He sat up slowly, leaning against the wall. Zura was still beside him, watching. He looked around, then met her eyes. "Thank you." Zura tilted her head. She didn't understand the words, but the way he said them, gently and with feeling, made her feel something strange and warm again. Caleb tried to speak more, but stopped. It was no use. They didn't share a language, so instead he did something else. He picked up a stick and drew on the frost-covered floor. A simple image, a stick figure of a human, holding a blanket. Then another figure, alien-shaped, smiling. Zura leaned over and stared at the drawing. Her eyes widened a little. Then, with one clawed finger, she added a star above the two figures. Caleb laughed softly, pointed to himself, then to the human figure. She nodded. Then he pointed to her, then to the alien figure. She nodded again. But this time her face softened. They spent the next hour, like that drawing, pointing, smiling. Without words, they shared a new kind of language, a quiet one. One made of shapes and laughter, of gestures and shared understanding. And in that silence, something beautiful grew. Not friendship, not yet, but trust, real trust. As night returned and they wrapped themselves in the bedroll again, they didn't sit apart this time. They sat close, shoulder to shoulder, heartbeat to heartbeat. The cold outside was still strong, but inside the shelter, it no longer mattered, because between a lost human and a wounded alien, a silent promise had already been made. They were no longer just two survivors. They were something more. Caleb sat on a rock, holding the broken communicator in his hands. The device was scratched and frozen. The screen cracked. But he refused to give up. Every wire he reconnected, every spark he saw, gave him hope. Zura watched from nearby, her silver eyes curious. She didn't understand his machine, but she could see the determination in his face. That she understood well. They had been together for 3 days now. The cold no longer scared them as much. The bedroll, the fire they managed to start with. Old parts and each other's company made the nights bearable. But they both knew help needed to come soon. Caleb's supplies were running low. Zura's wounds still hurt when she moved, and the snow was falling again. He glanced at her and smiled. "Almost there," he said, though she didn't know the words. She returned the smile, small but genuine to her. His voice was like a song, soft, steady and kind. Suddenly, the communicator blinked once. Caleb sat up straight. The small screen lit up with a faint signal bar. It was weak, very weak, but it was something. He stood quickly, turning in circles, holding the device high. He looked at Zura, excitement in his eyes. "Need higher." "Ground a signal, there's a signal." She tilted her head but understood his meaning. He pointed toward the rocky hill behind them. It wasn't too tall, but with the snow and the wind, it would not be easy. Still, she nodded. They packed what little they had and started climbing together. The path was slippery, and the cold stung their faces. Ilem offered his hand to help her when the rocks turned sharp. She accepted it without hesitation. Step by step, they reached the top. The wind was stronger there, howling past them. The view was wide and open. Caleb held the communicator up again. The signal bar blinked. Once more, still too weak to send a full message, he sighed, a little disappointed. But then Zura did something unexpected. She began to hum, a soft, slow melody deep and beautiful like water running beneath ice. Caleb turned to her, surprised. Her eyes were closed, her body swaying gently with the wind. The sound touched something inside him, without. Thinking Kaleem joined her, he didn't know her song. But he hummed something from earthen, old lullaby his mother used to sing. Their voices blended in the cold air. Different tones, different rhythms. But together they made something new, something peaceful, something warm when they finished. Silence fell again, but this time felt like a blanket instead of emptiness. Zura opened her eyes and smiled. From her pouch, she pulled out a small woven cloth, blue and gold threads shaped like waves. She looked at it, then held it out to him. Caleb hesitated. What is it? She didn't speak, but she placed the cloth around his shoulders, wrapping it like a scarf. Then she placed her hand over her heart. He understood. It was a gift, a sign of trust, of thanks, maybe more. He touched the cloth gently, feeling its warmth. Thank you, he whispered. She didn't reply, but the look in her eyes said everything. They sat together on that cold hilltop, side by side, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Above them, somewhere far beyond, a rescue ship might be listening, but down here, 2 lives had already been saved, not by fire, but by kindness, by patience, and by a song shared in the silence. The fire crackled softly, its warm light dancing on the walls of the ruined shelter. Caleb and Zura sat close, their faces glowing orange in the dark, cold night. The fire was small, made from dry roots and pieces of broken metal Caleb had found. It wasn't much, but it was enough to chase away the deepest cold. Caleb looked at Zura and smiled. He spoke slowly, hoping she would understand. I'm from Earth, he said, pointing to himself, and then drawing a circle with his hand. A planet far away. Zura watched quietly. She didn't understand his words yet, but she saw his kindness. She reached into her pack and took out a small crystal, smooth and shining. She held it up to the firelight. It glowed softly, Zura, she said, pointing to herself. Caleb repeated the name slowly. Zura. For the first time, they said their names aloud. The ice outside the shelter was thick and hard, but inside, their hearts began to melt. Caleb picked up a small stick and started to draw pictures on the ground. A star, a tree, a river. He pointed to the star and said, home. Then he pointed to the river and said, life. Zura smiled. She reached out and touched his hand. Slowly, carefully, she drew a broken sword. War, she whispered. Caleb nodded, his face serious. Yes, war. They both understood that war was part of their past, part of why they were here, alone and hurt. Zura looked away, her eyes full of sadness. My people, lost, she said softly. Exiled. Caleb's eyes softened. He reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. You're not alone, he said. Not anymore. For the first time, words felt real. The firelight flickered. The cold outside seemed farther away. Zura took a deep breath and shared a small story, not in words, but in gestures. She drew a circle in the air, then pointed to the ground. She raised her hands and shook her head. She was telling him how her people had been forced to leave their homeworld, how they survived on harsh planets, always watching the stars for hope. Caleb listened closely. He thought of his own home, the blue oceans and green forests of Earth. He understood loss. He understood hope. As the fire burned low, Caleb reached into his bag and pulled out a small music player. He pressed a button, and soft music began to play, gentle piano notes floating in the cold air. Zura's eyes widened. The music was strange, but beautiful. Caleb smiled and nodded. She reached into her pack again and gave him a small carved wooden figure, a symbol of peace in her culture. Caleb held it carefully. He looked at her and said, friend. Zura's face lit up with a rare smile. She repeated, friend. Oh. The night was long, but neither of them felt alone anymore. Between the warmth of the fire and the music, a new story was beginning. A story not of war, but of trust and friendship as the stars shone above. Caleb and Zura sat side by side, sharing a quiet hope. They were no longer just human and alien. They were something more, together. The cold night felt different this time. Caleb held the communicator tightly, his fingers numb but steady. A soft beep sounded, a sign that the rescue ship was close. Relief washed over him. Help was finally coming. Zura watched him quietly, her silver eyes full of questions. She understood the importance of the moment, but her heart was heavy. The humans might not welcome her. She had heard stories of fear, suspicion, and walls built between races. Caleb noticed her fear. He reached out and took her hand in his. "No matter what happens," he said, "I will protect you." She looked at him, searching his eyes. She saw no lies, only honesty, only warmth. Slowly she nodded. The communicator beeped again. The ship was almost here. Caleb packed their few belongings carefully. He looked around the frozen land that had been their home for days. It was harsh, but it had brought them together. Zura hesitated near the edge of the camp. She looked back toward the stars, then at Caleb. "I don't belong," she said softly. "They will not accept me." Caleb shook his head firmly. "You belong wherever you are safe, wherever you are cared for." She looked down, unsure. Kalel smiled gently. "I gave you my bedroll when you needed warmth." That night was not just kindness, it was trust. "You are part of my story now." Zura's eyes filled with tears. The cold wind blew, but she felt something stronger inside. Hope. The rescue ship's lights appeared on the horizon, growing brighter by the second. As it landed, Caleb and Zura stood side by side. The human crew approached, their faces serious but curious. They paused when they saw Zura, stranger and alien. For a moment, silence hung in the air, but Caleb stepped forward. "She is with me," he said clearly. The crew nodded, offering food and blankets. The medic checked Zura's wounds with gentle care. Zura felt their eyes, some kind, some wary. She kept close to Caleb. Later, she stepped outside the ship, looking up at the vast sky. Caleb found her there. He held out his badge, a small metal symbol worn by all team members. "This is my trust," he said. "Where I go, you are welcome to." Zura took the badge with trembling hands. She pressed it to her chest. "I will try," she whispered. Caleb smiled. "That's all anyone can ask." The stars shone brightly above them. For the first time, Zura believed there could be more than cold and fear. There could be warmth, there could be a home. The base was alive with noise and light. But Zura felt like she was outside it all. The humans moved quickly, talking and working. Machines hummed and bright screens flickered. It was a strange world to her, full of metal and light, not trees and stars. Caleb stayed close, never leaving her side. His calm presence was a comfort, but she still felt a wall between herself and the others. Some of the humans looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. She noticed the whispers, quiet but sharp. She was a stranger here, an alien with a past that some did not forget. One of the medics came to her with warm food and a blanket. "Eat," the medic said kindly, smiling. Zura nodded and accepted. The warmth of the food spread through her body, chasing away the last cold. Caleb watched her, proud. See, they want to help. But Zura wasn't sure. Later, she found a quiet corner outside the main building. The cold wind was sharper here, but the silence was peaceful. Caleb found her again. "Why do you hide?" She looked at him, eyes soft but tired. "I don't belong here." Caleb shook his head. "You do your part of us now." She hesitated, then pulled something from her paka, a small carved statue. It was old, worn, but beautiful. "This is from my people," she said, "a symbol of peace." Caleb took the statue carefully. "Thank you. I will keep it safe." They sat together under the stars that could just be seen beyond the base's lights. Slowly, Zura began to share more about her people, stories of their lives, their hopes, and their fears. Caleb listened, fascinated. He told her about Eartha. Oceans, the forests, the songs of birds, the walls between them grew thinner. Zura realized something: humans were not so different from her people. They both longed for safety, for friendship, for warmth. She smiled more now one evening. Kalem showed her a small garden he was planting near the base, a patch of green in the cold metal world. Maybe one day,
"Oh,"
he said, you can help me grow it. Zura's heart warmed at the thought. She leaned on him gently. I want to. Together they looked toward the future, a future where cold was chased away not just by fire, but by friendship. The days passed gently, soft, like the light of dawn. Zura walked beside Kalem, no longer as a stranger, but as someone belonging. The cold that once bit deep was now a quiet memory. The base felt less like a fortress and more like a home. They had built something new together, one evening. Under the vast sky where the twin moons shone bright, Zura came to Kalem with a small crystal pendant. It shimmered in the firelight, delicate and clear. This is from my people, she said quietly. A gift. Kalem took it, feeling the smooth surface warm in his hand. Thank you, he replied, smiling. They sat near the fire, their shadows long and calm. For a moment there was no need for words. The silence between them was full of meaning, trust, hope, and a quiet promise. Kalem looked at Zura and said, You gave me something warmer than fire. She smiled softly, her eyes shining like stars. And you gave me a home. The base around them buzzed with life. Other humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing stories, food, and laughter. Walls were falling between worlds and hearts. Zura had become a bridge, symbol of what was possible when fear was replaced by kindness. She often thought back to that cold night, the bedroll, silence, the warmth that grew without flame. Now, she knew the truth. Warmth was not just from fire, it came from caring, from trust, from being seen and accepted. Kalem reached for her hand. Together, they looked up at the stars, dreaming of new worlds and new beginnings. In the cold universe, they had found something rare and beautiful, something truly human.